So glad you're on our side.
If I can have your attention just for a second,
Whoa.
this is really artful.
I know, but I was going to do that on this microphone. The lovely Deb Baca will make an announcement.
So, again, there's this nice little basket here, and if you are able, we would gladly accept some donations for the food. And this is going around, nice big baskets.
Right. And we also sort of have to pay the rent for the New Mexico School of Music. I'd really like to thank the New Mexico School of Music for allowing us in their beautiful facility. Thank you, Sally Alice, for being the spearhead to getting us all organized. Thank you, everybody, for coming out. And I'm gonna turn this over to Sally Alice, who has a number of things that she wants to talk about before we get going.
Well, again, thank you everybody for coming and for your patience with our troubles that we had getting things organized. I want to let you know that Dee Dee Feldman, besides being a former senator, is also a noted author of a book about the inside of the roundhouse at Santa Fe, and she has copies here. And she'd be glad to sign them if anybody wants to buy them. How much are they? $26.70. And they're worth every penny of it. And now I'm going to introduce Mary Smith from the League of Women Voters, who's going to moderate our panel.
Thank you, Sally Alice. I would want to welcome everybody for coming tonight, and those of you who are able to watch the documentary either in part or in total, I appreciate you doing so. And tonight's event is sponsored by Get the MOP, and MOP stands for Money Out of Politics. And Tom stole my line. I also wanted to thank Sally Alice for spearheading tonight's event, so thank you for that. What we're going to do now is we're going to present to you a distinguished panel of 5 community members who will speak to various aspects of either the film or campaign financing or Citizens United, pretty much whatever they feel is of interest to them and or of interest to you. And what we're going to do is allow each panelist to speak individually, and they will talk for a maximum of 8 minutes because we don't want you to, to be here all night. And because I am anal retentive, we're going to go in alphabetical order, and Paul had pointed out first name or last name, so I'm going with the last name because I hadn't even thought about the first name thing. But so anyway, we'll start off with that. And at the end of the panel presentations, then we will open the floor up to the members of the audience. So if you wanted to either question the panelists or make your own public comments, you're welcome to do that. We will limit you to no more than 2 minutes. And I've got Bob Allen up here as my timekeeper, and I may be short, but I am pretty aggressive in moderating forums from the League of Women Voters, so don't think I won't cut you off if any of you, even the panelists up here, if you're going on too long, because I don't want everybody to be here all night. So we will start off with our first panelist, and this person is Juliana Bilovich, and hold on. Okay. Juliana is a UNM student of International Studies and Political Science, as well as a community liaison for the UNM Peace and Justice Studies program. And Ms. Bilovich will address the message relayed to students by the Citizens United decision and its impact on younger lives. Following Juliana, we will have Senator Dee Dee Feldman. She is a former state senator from 1997 to 2012, representing Albuquerque's North Valley. As Sally Alice had pointed out, Senator Feldman is also the author of the book that we have for sale here, Inside the New Mexico Senate, Boots, Suits, and Citizens, which has 3 chapters devoted to campaign finance reform, ethics, and transparency issues in New Mexico. Senator Feldman successfully sponsored 2 public financing measures for the PRC and for the New Mexico Supreme Court and Court of Appeals. And she also sponsored the 2009 bill to limit campaign contributions to elected officials and sponsored the bill to require campaign finance reports to be made available online on the Secretary of State's website. Senator Feldman will talk about pretty much anything she'd like to, but about this year's legislative agenda and past legislative accomplishments regarding campaign funding. Third up will be Councilor Ray Garduno. Councilor Garduno is Albuquerque City Councilor representing District 6 and is the current council president. Councilor Garduno will speak to campaign funding and financing from a local city level as well as his primary focus. Next up will be Paul J. Gessing. Paul is the president of the Rio Grande Foundation, a free market-oriented public policy research organization based in Albuquerque. Hold on one second here. Mr. Gessing's general take is that Citizens United was correctly decided by the Supreme Court, that government limitations tend to hinder free speech, and that overall it is simply impossible to get money out of politics. And bringing up the end of the panelists, but certainly not the least person, is Kat Jabbar. Kat is the vice president of Albuquerque Now, the National Organization for Women. And Ms. Jabbar will talk about women's issues in the Citizens United Supreme Court decision. I would like to caution the audience that as part of my policing, I am a big fan of ensuring civility, and so I would appreciate it that you show respect and in deference to the panelists here and the positions that they have to say. And we're very lucky to have all of them here. They're all going to talk about something different, so please be respectful of them and their time. So we'll start off with Juliana Bilovich, and she'll talk about youth issues.
Hello. First of all, I want to thank everyone who is here tonight, and especially Sally Alice for inviting me to participate. In a way, I'd like to extend an invitation, but let me first begin my 8 minutes or less. I'm here to talk to you today about the youth perspective. But first of all, I want you to know that there is not necessarily one single youth position on Citizens United. Indeed, it is the diversity and varying potential that makes up the strength of our youth and of America. It is precisely these diverse voices, backed up by hope and hard work, but not necessarily by wealth, that Citizens United quiets. Students believe in having access to information. It may look like we're hiding behind our smartphones all the time, which we are. But in truth, the younger generation holds an especially high standard for information accessibility and for transparency. Just like everyone else, we dislike it when secrets are kept from us, especially secrets about political financial influence that directly impact our lives. Secondly, students believe in being given a chance. Youth make up a brilliant and eager part of our population, whose political participation, as you all know, is sorely missed. But how can we compete with corporate America? Many of us are young and scared of entering the marketplace and the workforce, paying off our debt, and finding our place in society. Above all, we want the chance to contribute, regardless of how much money we have. Third, students believe in participation. Our campuses have a wide array of opportunities. But as a student among students, I know that the hardest task on campus is to convince my peers that we can all make a difference. Especially in the face of large spending by corporations, young individuals feel ever more disenfranchised and powerless. Fourth, students believe in fair opportunities. When money can buy a louder political influence, the system is inherently flawed, as you all know. Those of us who already feel underrepresented are drowned out by the money in politics. Let our energy, our hours, and our hope count for as much influence as money. Lastly, students believe in innovation. We have a lot of hope for the future since for many of us it's all we have. We can even imagine a system of publicly funded government overseen campaign finance in which wealth doesn't influence the outcome. This is the democracy we believe in, and it's representative truly. The message that Citizens United sends to students and youth is that there is little place for us in politics, but we believe otherwise. Students in Albuquerque want to work together with the community to reverse this impression and get involved. Thank you.
And next up is Senator Dee Dee Feldman.
Wow, that's a hard act to follow. Really? I mean, that was so well prepared, and I'm so very impressed. And you know, it again reinforces my belief in democracy. And you know, the movie was great. Did you like the movie? I thought it was just terrific. The part that resonated so much with me, of course, was the part about campaigning and how hard it is, impossible it is, for an underdog to win in this day and age. And yet we also do, at the same time as we feel that, you know, all this cynicism about all this money in politics, we also do hold the belief that one person can make a difference. I still believe that. I don't know whether you do, but I was led to believe this back in 2000 when I met a woman by the name of Granny Dee. And Granny Dee came to New Mexico in 2000 on her way across country. She was walking across the nation and finally ended up on the steps of Capitol Hill, where she was greeted by John McCain, and that was the year that the McCain-Feingold bill passed in the Senate and in the House, and of course, which was overthrown now by Citizens United. And you know, 10 years after that, no, maybe 13 years after that, after I had given a little speech about, you know, legislative stuff and what we had accomplished at the legislature and how difficult it was, and that a lot of that is covered in this book. Somebody came up to me afterwards and said, "How old was she when she did that?" And I said, "I think she was 89. And this person said to me, "You know, I think I could do that." And that person was Sally Alice. And so I think that's a proof positive that one person, two people, three people really does make a difference. So I was just so struck by the title of this, Pay to Play, and it's something that's on everybody's lips, and that we know exists, and we know is actually legal. I mean, in a sane world, you know, everybody, I think, would see that huge campaign contributions are actually a form of legalized bribery. That's really, I mean, I don't know about you, but remember when, I think it was Robert Vigil was sent to prison for corruption, and there was actually a videotape of him being handed a manila envelope from the back seat of a car, and his testimony in court was, "Oh no, that was not a bribe. that was a campaign contribution, and hence was indeed perfectly legal. So, I mean, I think that is sort of what we're up against. And the interesting thing for me about the movie, and I keep looking at the blank screen, oh well, was that the prescriptions that were given at the end were exactly the same prescriptions that I gave at the last chapter of the book, and things that I do believe will help restore public trust and allow everyone to run for office and everyone to be held accountable. And that is public financing of campaigns, independent redistricting commission that would have ordinary citizens drawing lines rather than incumbents, and transparency. And ironically, these things also mirror exactly Common Cause's legislative agenda this year. So I think that you should pay attention to Common Cause, and I say that because I'm now helping them try to put forward their agenda, which probably to many of you seems really incremental. And it is incremental. And that's because, you know, you can't get everything, and I'm here to tell you, after 16 years, you can't get everything on day one, no matter how unjust the situation is. So I first introduced a bill to limit campaign contributions to candidates in New Mexico the first year I came to the Senate, and that was 1997. It finally passed in 2009. So that was 12 years. And then, of course, almost immediately after, the following year, what happened? And that was Citizens United was passed. Our campaign contribution limits are still very important and are stemming the tide of even more money coming into our state campaigns. But it just shows that nothing is eternal. And if you pass a law, you have to be willing to fix it, and you have to be flexible and agile and adapt to new circumstances. Because if you're not, it's kind of like the wind. I mean, and a tree. If you are not flexible, you are destined to be bent out of shape. So we've got to adapt to the new environment and to get some victories and open up the books, continue to especially make sure that independent expenditures now are transparent and not anonymous, so that big money is then funneled from one PAC to another PAC to another PAC to a political party, and then finally into our local campaigns, which are becoming increasingly divisive with national issues that have nothing to do with New Mexico. And that even the candidates rebel against, be they Republicans or Democrats. So anyway, thanks very much, and thank you again to the folks who are organizing this, Mary, and I'm going to yield my time.
And next up of our panelists is City Council President Ray Garduno from District 6.
Thank you, Mary. And thanks to everyone for being here. Thanks for the work you do. And I know that you will be hearing not only what I have to say, but what has been said already and the people coming behind me. And there will be some disagreement. But that's all right. That's all right, because we need to work this through. I'm happy to say that I ran under public financing and will not run under any other system. I don't care if the Koch brothers come tomorrow and say, you know, we've got to extra couple million that we'd like to give you, I'd say, well, you know, why don't you give me the 2 million and we'll set up a nice preschool somewhere or do something good with that. But for now, all I need is $5 from you. That's what I ask for when I go door to door. What I ask for is $5 from each person that is willing to support me. And for that $5, they have complete access to me. If I knock at your door and you don't have the $5 or don't want to give me the $5, you have complete access to me. Because I believe that I represent everyone, whether they're Republican, Democrats, DTSs, or whatever else. It is my job to do that. But I think it makes it a lot easier when I get that phone call from you. I know that you didn't give me more than $5. However, if I was in another situation where someone had given me $10,000 and the name comes up on my phone, my smartphone, which then leads me to believe, boy, I better answer this. I better answer this call. He gave me $10,000. There's a possibility he can give me another $10,000. But that's not the conversation. It's not to give me another $10,000. It's to say, remember the $10,000 I did give you? Here's what I want from you. And these are the demands I have of you. And I would say, well, you know, is that the way it works? He says, you bet. Because if you don't do what I want for my $10,000, whoever runs against you is going to get my $10,000. And they will do what you won't. So don't think that there's no connection. Don't think that people don't have that kind of access. It's not really access. It's a way of extortion. We think, well, you know, they just want to make sure that people do good and pass good laws and all of those things. That's why they're so interested. Nonsense. Absolute nonsense. I don't care if it's the Koch brothers or the fella down the street who happened to make a lot of money on government contracts probably and every other way that they complain about. And they have the audacity to do that. They have the audacity to say, you know, we need small government. We need people out of my life. However, I want my Medicare and my Medicaid, and I want, you know, my Social Security when I become disabled. However, I don't want anybody else to get it. I want incentives because I want to build this wonderful development. I want you to get rid of the impact fees, which are absolutely necessary. And we have a city council that decided not that long ago, under a different makeup, to get rid of impact fees. Something that was fought for over many years, way before I was on the council. There was something called the Planned Growth Strategy. Under that, it was decided that if you're going to build somewhere other than in the core of the city, where we already have infrastructure, where we already have everything that we need for you to build, now the property may be a little higher because it's already developed around you. And you shouldn't go out on the outskirts of town. So, but I just bought 10,000 acres at $100 an acre. I want to develop it. And then I want to sell it back to you. Or worse, I want you to pay for the infrastructure around my property, like we have on the west side, where we were promised, literally promised, that there was going to be tremendous growth. And all of these folks were going to come in. All we needed to do was, within that framework, invest $2.9 million. That could have gone anywhere else in the city. Put up lights, put up all kinds of infrastructure. There is one business there. The rest of it is weeds. We paid $2.9 million to feed weeds because we have a great sprinkler system. We have a great, all of these things that we were asked to do. It wasn't like, oh, you know what, we're going to do it, and then you folks will benefit from it. It was extortion again. Now let me go back to why I think everybody should run under public financing. And I want to thank Vicki and Mary, everybody that's working on the issue. And whether you're knocking on doors or whether you're doing some of the policy thinking, I want to thank you, because that's the kind of thing we need. I don't have to worry and stay up nights wondering when that call is going to come to ask me for an extortion and a pound of flesh. Because I can tell that person, get in line. There are many other folks who gave just as much as you did, $5. So if somebody tells you it's voice, it's not voice. It's a thunderous cacophony of people taking advantage of all of us. They have drowned us out. And they have, in many ways, forgotten that we still have the power. And I say everywhere I go, I do not give in to despair. And I will not spiral down that rabbit hole of that abyss of hopelessness. That's where they want us. And that's where a lot of us find ourselves sometimes, because we think we have nothing we can do about it. Absolute nonsense. They will throw everything at you, and they have at me, even at this level, at the city level. When I'm on that dais, if you think it's all harmony and wonderfulness, it isn't. There are a lot of things going on in the background that is more than just noise. It is absolute, as I say, extortion. Thank you.
And next in our line of panelists is Paul Gessing, the president of the Rio Grande Foundation.
Thanks, everyone. I'm here to be the skunk at the garden party, the ants at the picnic, the guy everyone loves to hate. So they do have that in professional wrestling, so you gotta be that guy sometimes. But I do want to thank Bill Pratt in particular for inviting me, so I appreciate that. And I want to applaud you all for, whether I agree or disagree with you, for spending your Saturday night hanging out, watching a movie about public financing of elections and campaign finance reform, and then sitting and being a part of this discussion. I applaud your involvement in the process, no matter how corrupt and broken it may be. And I want to start off by kind of noting that Councilor Garduno, and I appreciate his service on City Council, decried the impact fee issue, which all occurred, by the way, on a City Council where it's public financing of an election. So people do bad things. People are influenced by lobbyists and whatnot. We're not going to change the entire political process based on limits on campaign finance issues. The situation is much deeper and far different. It goes beyond campaign finance. I didn't get to see the movie, but I'm born and raised in Cincinnati, Ohio, and I know who Jean Schmidt is. She was there when I was actually working in Washington, D.C., and I hate her with every fiber of my being. So don't think of every conservative / libertarian as being aligned with certain policymakers. We have a red team and a blue team, and frequently they represent different groups that we do not agree with at all, even if we sometimes side with that particular team. I run a 501c3 nonprofit. Some people think those groups should be introduced into this whole discussion. If you're interested in more of the history on 501c3 organizations like mine and why we are able to keep our donor identities secret, anonymous, and I think anonymous donors can be a very good thing, I would encourage you to look at a Supreme Court decision, 1958, U.S. Supreme Court, NAACP versus the state of Alabama. I'll only note that it would involve some supporters of the NAACP and some politicians who happened to be in Alabama in 1958 who really, really, really wanted to know who was donating the NAACP. Anonymity can and has played a very powerful role in our society, and I would just caution you, sometimes anonymity can be a very important and good thing. Those noted right-wingers at the ACLU also, I count them among my allies on this Citizens United in particular issue. I'll read a few quick comments from the ACLU on the Citizens United decision, which, by the way, the AFL-CIO, another notorious right-wing band of brigands, signed on to. The ACLU does not support a campaign finance regulation premised on the notion that the answer to money in politics is to ban political speech. Experience over the last 40 years has taught us that money always finds an outlet, and the endless search for loopholes simply creates the next target for new regulation. It also contributes to cynicism about our political process, and I would definitely say that that is a true statement. Any rule that requires the government to determine what political speech is legitimate and how much political speech is appropriate is difficult to reconcile with the First Amendment. So I count myself as a proud libertarian. I'm not a conservative. And I think the ACLU captures what my view is very well in those statements. City of Albuquerque is indeed publicly financed, but if you don't think that some outsider megabucks, this is New Mexico, so we don't have a lot of those megabucks people. When your only publicly traded company is the local utility, that means not a lot of super big rich people are coming in to go intervene in city council races. I would just say that you're going to have organizations like that spring up if you have public financing, because money will always find a way. And in this legislative race this year, I understand the people being appalled at the level of vitriol and some of the campaigns that went on in the legislature, but the reason we had such controversial legislative races is because we had the opportunity, for the Republicans at least, for once in 62 years to take power. And a lot of Democrat organizations did not want that. A lot of conservative organizations, Republican, even some libertarian organizations did want that. It's not better or worse, but it is a sign that we are in a more competitive political situation in New Mexico. And they're all trying to inform people in their own way. And I certainly understand that you don't think, golly gee, let me watch some campaign finance ads because I want to be informed about the political process. But that is the way things happen, and the way that the campaigns view their ability to get their word out as best as possible. And I know I've got a lot of different things. One of the different issues is that before, and I'm not a super supporter of any group of politicians. I don't love politicians at all, with the exception of Counselor and Feldman. But 1.5, before the Watergate campaign finance reforms, but before Watergate, it was almost open season, very few limits on campaign financing. And Watergate was really a watershed moment, if you will, because the Nixon administration was extorting corporations. It wasn't that the corporations were trying to bribe Nixon. Nixon was so damn corrupt, he didn't need any bribing. He was extorting companies and wanted to keep that secret. So it was really kind of a flip side of what we are dealing with today. But before those came about, 1.5 to 1 in terms of the incumbent advantage. So incumbents won 1.5 races for every one that a challenger won. Now it's 4 to 1, and that's, I think, a big part of the way campaign finance works. It makes it more difficult, more paperwork, more involved to be a challenger. George McGovern, the presidential candidate, pre-campaign finance, basically got his entire campaign started based on a couple of millionaires. Millionaires, I don't know who they were. I haven't read that much history about it, but they probably were very concerned about the Vietnam War and wanted to see someone stand up and say they were against it. So historically, liberal ideas and liberal groups have benefited from anonymity and the involvement of different organizations in campaigns. I don't think you're going to stop through legislation passed, by the way, by politicians who tend to have something at stake in the matter. And I'll just leave it at that, and we can go into discussion after this. Or one more presentation. There you go, sorry.
And our last panelist tonight is Kat Jabbar. She is the Vice President of Albuquerque Now.
I just want to thank everybody for being here. It's such an honor and a privilege to be here, and it's so important to have a diverse opinions on an issue that's so important. Stand up? I'd prefer to sit. Do you want me to stand? Kids. All right. I was hoping I could get away with sitting, but all right. So I just want to thank everybody here, and it's just so important that we have public spaces to talk about opinions that we may differ on. I want to start off by just telling you my story and how the story ties into my work with NOW and the impact of the Citizens United on my personal life and the life, what I've dedicated my life work is to be to work on behalf of women's rights. So I come from a family that were immigrant families that struggled. My grandfather was a labor organizer in New England. Worked very hard. My father, they were also identified as social justice Catholics. So I was embedded with values of love thy neighbor, look out for your underdog, care about people that are suffering, do something for people that are suffering. We're in this together, and value the worth and dignity of every human being. But my family taught me that it's just not enough to think that. You actually have to act on that. And you have to act on that on a bigger scale. And that bigger scale, what they're talking about, that's the political system. That your beliefs advocate, they have to be reflected in the political system. And what I'm talking about is if you love thy neighbor, then you promote legislation that's showing that you love thy neighbor. That you are making sure your neighbor is making a livable wage. That their kids have good health care, they can go to school. That your neighbors that are working hard aren't being discriminated against, that my dad's daughters have a right to an education and they're not going to be treated as second-class citizens. So my dad was also very animated, very forthcoming with his beliefs. And I remember at 9 years old I was talking to him. I mean, he was a good guy, but he wasn't always perfect. He wasn't so great on the women's issue, and I kind of challenged him and said, well, what about women? And he looked at me, because he was a man that harangued a lot and got on his tirades. And he looked down at his glasses. I was sitting at the table, had his cup of coffee. And he said, Catherine, bangs on the table. He said, if women want to improve their lot, you've got to get involved in the political system. You just don't have a choice. So that's so hence I carried that work forward, and I really have to thank my dad for that. So as a member, I've joined NOW, and I want to talk a little bit about NOW. And I just want to start off with NOW. These are my opinions as a member of NOW. I'm not necessarily reflecting the National Organization of Women. I'm coming from the local chapter of ABQ NOW. So how does this all tie into what I'm doing and the work that I'm doing? So this decision, Citizens United, has really had a devastating impact. For me, for people that care about justice, that love thy neighbors. And the reason being is that if we are living in a country where the person with the most money wins, it's very difficult for people, working people, ordinary people, people that are not connected to compete with big money. It's almost impossible, you can't. It's so hard. So there might be somebody working $7 an hour that has great ideas that may never get his or her voice heard, because they don't have the access to money. They don't have that access to power. The other thing that's problematic is that you cannot have to disclose who you are, so it's very confusing for voters. You don't know who's giving money behind the ideas. Because I believe that what you value is reflected in your money, so you shouldn't shy away from what you put your money forth, Because if you really believe it, it's going to be reflected in the money you give. So to give money and not say who you are, in my opinion, that's hypocritical. So I'm going to give 3 specific examples of how this decision has impacted women, and men for that matter too, because I feel men suffer from an exploitive system just as much as women do. The first one is, many of you may be familiar with the anti-abortion laws in Texas. HB 22, probably the most restrictive abortion laws we've seen. It's basically shut down many abortion clinics in Texas. This affects women, particularly poor women that can't get access to abortions. What they did, they put one of the most restrictive laws where the clinics had to have building codes of a surgical clinic, and that just financially crippled them. They just couldn't do it. They had to shut their doors. But this wasn't some spontaneous uprising of citizens that wanted to get rid of a woman's right to choose. That's not how that decision happened. That decision happened. That was an outgrowth of the Citizens United decision. What that gave birth to is multi-billion groups getting money from multi-billionaires supporting anti-choice groups. That's how they got rid of that. That's how they destroyed the right to choose in Texas. That wasn't people. That was planned, orchestrated. That was a byproduct of Citizens United. Since the Citizens United, we've had unprecedented number of anti-choice politicians, 2010 to 2012. And again, the way they're getting through this is that, unlimited spending, so people on the grassroots can't compete, and they're not telling people who they are. And another thing how that confuses voters is that if you heard the Susan Anthony group, what would be the first thing that would come to your mind? Liberal? Well, that's an anti-choice group. Its aim is to anti-abortion, and again, that's covered through this multi-billion network of people. So it's confusing, it's deceitful, it's not honest. And that is not democracy. The second one is the Hobby Lobby decision, and that for the broad new privileges to corporations, granting them religious rights for the first time. So a corporation has religious rights. So the implication for that is that they did not have to adhere to the Obama mandate for insurance employees, for employees to be covered for birth control under their insurance plans. So that applies to 90% business, 52% of the workforce. And again, that's devastating if you're a poor woman or a man that wants to have some say in his family planning. And you're making $7 an hour, that puts an undue burden to try to find you or your partner some birth control so you can control the number of children you're having. And then lastly, as women in politics, it's a good thing to have women in politics for parity. But the other thing why it's important to have women in politics, because generally speaking, women are the ones that are going to vote for pro-people legislation and policies. And we find that research shows no matter if Democrat, Libertarian, Republican, when you have women in office, they generally are going to vote for more pro-people policies. And then what the problem is with women, we're already vastly underrepresented in government. We are less than 20% of Congress, and worldwide, the United States is 98% in the percentage of women in legislature. And the reason why that's so difficult is because we just can't raise the money. We're overpowered by the money. And that's used 98th. So we're behind 98th in the world. We're, okay, 98th in the world, a percentage of women in legislature. So that means Kenya, we're behind Kenya. We're behind Indonesia of women's participation. So what I want to say is that money is not speech. And if we live in democracy, we have to believe in leveling the playing field. Thank you.
That concludes the formal comments from our 5 panelists. And so now I'd like to open the floor up to the audience members for a little bit of time. I'm kind of watching the clock, and I don't want to keep the panelists especially here for much longer than 15, 20 minutes perhaps. But I'll see how it goes. What I would like to remind the audience is please be direct and concise in your questions of the panelists and or your comments that you make. You don't have to ask a question. You can make a comment as well. And I ask everyone here tonight to please be respectful of each other and the views and comments of not only the panelists but also your fellow audience members, because tonight is intended to provoke a thoughtful and productive dialogue amongst all of us, and I hope we can continue to do that. In order to, so that I can pretend that I'm a police person, please raise your hand if you have a question of the panel or if you would like to add your own comments to the discussion, and please wait for me to recognize you before you start speaking. So this woman has her hand up, so we'll go with her first.
Yes, thank you. My name is Sharon. I'm a member of NOW. I would like to ask Paul, in your example of Alabama, the NAACP, and the anonymity of membership. In the case of the NAACP, I see that there could be danger to the people whose names were revealed. There was a time in the South when people were hanging from trees. But I would like to know how, in the current political environment, if major multi-million-dollar donors' names were revealed, in what way would they suffer?
And that's a good question. I don't know how many multimillionaires suffer necessarily. Like, does George Soros or the Koch brothers personally feel pain when they're critiqued in the papers and on the media? I don't know. But there is a recent example that happened, and I'm going to probably get a few of the facts wrong, but the gist I know I have right. One of the top executives at Mozilla, it's a web search engine deal, he had given like $1,000 or something to a campaign dealing with, I believe, gay rights in California. The anti-gay side, but the side that President Obama was on up until a few years ago when he had a change of heart. So this is not like, he's not necessarily a radical, crazy person. And he, due to the political outcry relating to his donation, a relatively modest donation, lost his job. And I think that is the kind of thing that to this day, a lot of folks have to counter if they are going to engage. I mean, that was a ballot measure campaign in California. Apparently their rules don't have any room for anonymity. Now, obviously, a lot of, all political campaigns that I know of have disclosure. It's other organizations, 501c3s, 501c4s. C3s are not inherently political, we're educational. I'm telling this to the group, not you, of course. C4s are allowed to engage in more lobbying, and they are anonymous as well. Anonymity varies across the system. I'm just saying that it's got a purpose and a point that it should be maintained in some instances. I have no problem inherently with campaign donations not being anonymous.
Any other questions?
Do you want to answer my question too? If that's okay with Sally. Is that okay?
I think the reality that we're seeing today is that businesses and, to a certain extent, wealthy individuals are using campaign contributions as business investments. This is why they do not want their identity known, is because they're afraid they will lose business. If they back a Republican candidate, they're afraid that they'll lose Democrats as customers, and vice versa. So I think that's kind of the reality, and I think that the personal harm feature is pretty rare.
I have two comments. First, and I'm name challenged to the city representative from NOW, and that is, even though as a general statement I agree with you that women tend to see things in more humanistic perspectives and look at the consequences to other women as well as the larger society, I think, unfortunately, there's also the situations where women who are in the upwardly mobile career mold, and they're almost like aping men because that is the way to get ahead. So I also think of some very conservative women in the world, such as Margaret Thatcher, and of course in the lady from Ohio in the film. So you also have to guard against sort of false consciousness and realizing again how the plight of women is so tied up to the plight of others and also so many socioeconomic issues. And the second comment was in relation to education. And I'm a retired teacher, but to some extent, I blame the larger educational system for what is happening because critical thinking is not encouraged. However, I see this again as it's not in the interests of large corporations to have that type of critical thinking. And the educational system for years and years, and I can quote, or refer to work by Samuel Bowles, basically mirrored the corporate system. And if you look at who succeeded, there's obviously a great amount of overlap between high socioeconomic status and succeeding in the educational system. And things are getting, even if there were moves during the 60s and 70s to equalize things, they're going back the other way. And just as a personal statement, my heart goes out to people in universities, the incredible debts they now have. Again, another issue. Anyway, that's all. Thank you.
This woman here.
Well, I had two comments. Something that Dee Dee said I just kind of wanted to, it sparked a thought that I'd like to articulate. You asked for patience with incremental change, and I understand the need for that. I'd also like to kind of defend those of us who are not that patient with incremental change because I'm one of those people, and I think we have to have those folks too out there calling for the whole shebang at once in order to help the incremental change happen. You have to have that strong voice on the part of some of the grassroots organizations. So I just want to say, and then something that Paul, you're from Cincinnati, I am too. So that's great. So something that Paul said, I don't know if you meant what I thought you meant, but I did want to say that from what I heard you say, I thought there was a lot of truth in what you said, that we can change the funding, but we've got an economic system where we've got people who've got huge amounts of power and money, and then the rest of us, 68% of our students are in poverty now in New Mexico. And, as a teacher, we see that, I see that every day. And I don't know if you're calling for this, but what I took from your statement was that we need not only we need not only the campaign reform, but we need a different economic system. I just want to throw that out. We need a different economic system, and we need to change that too, or we will still have people finding ways to undermine our campaign reform.
And I don't think we're on the same wavelength, but that's okay. But I would just throw out that even in a repressive society like the Soviet Union, power and resources led to influence. It's just very, very difficult in a fraught path leading away from free speech if you're going to enact a lot of regulations on people's activity in campaigns. And power and influence are part of the human being and the animal, and we are not going to be able to eliminate those kinds of things. You can limit some money from some people some of the time, but just like in Jurassic Park, the dinosaurs found a way out, and money's going to find a way out of those fragile systems. Sir.
Well, thank you. With all due respect, Paul, I just don't believe that poverty is a natural state of being. And I certainly don't believe that those who are poor, any of us, love being poor. and don't want to have some avenue to better ourselves, to make a statement that we want to make. And a while ago it was just said that when you're oppressed, it's very difficult to get under that oppression by yourself. And if we think and are happy with the way things are and have this fatalistic attitude that, hey, that's just the way those people are, that's the way they're going to be, and there's always going to be amongst us. And I'm happy with that. What the heck? As long as I have a little bit and don't suffer as much as other folks, I'm all right with it. Well, I'm not. I'm not all right with it.
This woman here in the gray hair. I've got gray.
Okay. With all due respect to what you said about change coming incrementally, I'd like to ask the audience, how many of you think the money changes and political changes have been coming incrementally and slowly? So what I used to hear is that the U.S. had 7% of the world's population and 25% of its wealth. And I just read a headline the other day that said, within the next couple of years, 1% of the world's people will have 50% of the world's wealth. And to me, that sounds a lot like a tsunami. And I have spoken in front of the city council, and they've been polite and listened. I have tried to talk to our 2 senators on several occasions. And what I know about the influence of money is that they knew it didn't come from me. And they knew they didn't have to listen, they didn't have to respect, they didn't have to answer. And Ray, you say you have accessibility. I would tell you, I took Martin Heinrich on a bike ride on a tandem, and I was doing most of the pedaling. And I should have known, but even I do. And you know what? You'll have to be the captain because I'm not strong enough to pedal either him or you anymore. But in spite of being a face that's seen and has spoken and has tried to confront, there's not any way of accessibility to these people at all. They know they have the power. And for you, Mr. Gessing, I'd like to ask how that plays, what I've said plays into what you believe, because I think that what you're saying sounds nice, but it's not true.
There is no doubt that having money is an aspect of power. It's the reality of the situation. It's like saying that a cloud isn't going to create rain. It is what it is by its nature. Money and power are interchangeable, and money can buy a heck of a lot of speech, and it can buy more speech for the people with more. That doesn't mean it always works out the way that people with money want it to work out. I have a little thing here that I have to keep, but this is a Linda for U.S. Senate 2010. That's Linda McMahon from Connecticut. She spent $100 million to get elected over 2 campaign cycles to U.S. Senate in Connecticut. This is the most tangible representation of that campaign. It's a Nerf football. Money does not always work. In Colorado just this year, a campaign for greater spending on education failed by like a 70-30 margin. Tax increases often are supported by a wide variety of businesses. They fail frequently. So money can buy a lot, but it can't always buy you the votes you think it will buy. And that's the limits of that kind of power. And I could go chapter and verse. And I'll do one more. What's her name? Meg Whitman, California. She spent hundreds of millions of dollars in that state and also lost, but I don't have a tangible item representing her campaign. However, people spend lots of money all the time and lose miserably in politics because their ideas don't match the state or the district or whatever they're in. And so you do have power. I would just say, look, I may be on a different political side for most of y'all, but you guys have a lot of power. You guys have, by and large, controlled New Mexico's politics for 62 years, with a few Republican governors being an exception. This is a state that has followed the liberal playbook, and now Republicans, whether it's money or whatever it is, are getting a shot at at least 2 out of the 3 of the branches of New Mexico government. And you're empowered, though. It could easily switch back if they screw up.
You know, okay, I'll have Kat answer this, but I'm looking at the clock, and we'll have time for, I'm going to take 2 more questions or comments, and I haven't taken anybody from this side of the room. So let me give this to Kat for a few seconds, and then we'll take two more comments or questions.
Just a quick comment that if money didn't influence the political process, then why are they spending so much money doing this? That's my comment.
Okay, another question. Do we have anybody on this side of the room? No, we do not. Okay. How about if you come up here and use the microphone?
I just wanted to ask a question. How many of you guys think poverty is bad?
Okay. Thank you. One last question. Okay.
This acceptance that money naturally buys power and control should absolutely be challenged. I've traveled extensively in Europe. The Danes have figured it out. The Dutch have figured it out. The Norwegians have figured it out. The Swedes have figured it out. There are people there who make plenty of money, but they also pay their fair share. And everybody benefits from bike paths and national health care systems. We can all have a better life if those with money pay a fair share for everybody's benefit.
I'd like to respond to that. Thank you for your comment. I happen to heartily agree. I came to this country when I was 14 years old, meaning that I have a bit of a different perspective. And first of all, there are certain things that I love about this country, and there are certain things that I aspire to learn from other countries that are already doing it right. So on that note, I'd like to say that in my home country, which is Germany, there are college students, university students who are active in politics, not because they feel they have to, but because it's considered what everybody does. And a large part of that, I think, comes from the fact that there is a sense that what we say and what we do as young people matters, makes a difference. That is absolutely missing here, and I would love all of your help in changing that. Thank you.
I would. Thank you. Thank you. I'd like to wrap up tonight, and I'd like to thank you all for being here. And I hope tonight's event was thought-provoking and has allowed you to become better informed about the issues that matter to all of us. I'd like to ask you all to join me in a round of applause for our panelists. And again, our panelists were former Senator Dee Dee Feldman, Albuquerque Now Vice President Kat Jabbar, Juliana Bilovich from UNM, Paul Gessing from the Rio Grande Foundation, and Ray Gaudino from the Albuquerque City Council. And thank you all for being here. Thank you, Sally Alice Thompson, for setting this up. So thank you, good night, and please drive safely home.
I do have to make one quick announcement before you all go, and I hope she hasn't left already. I forgot to thank our wonderful cook, Regina Romero, or Jeannie Romero, who is a renowned Southwestern cook who was nice enough to donate her services. Thank you, Hudson. Thank you, the School of Music. Thank you, every group that supported this event. Thank you, everybody, for coming out. Have a very nice evening.
Yeah, we should.